Influence of the British on Indian culture. Although the British rule in India was tyrannical, it exposed the few English-educated urban Indians to the philosophy, rationalism, and culture of the West. This caused a major intellectual upheaval. As a result, the traditional religions and Brahminical interpretations of the Vedas too were challenged. They led to the formation of huge movements. Societies led by radical thinkers wanted equality for men regardless of caste. They also campaigned vigorously for upliftment of the status of the Indian woman. Since the capital of the early British rule was Calcutta, most of these movements were started in Bengal. The first such movement was the Brahmo Samaj. Ram Mohan Roy was regarded as modern India's first great leader and was the founder of the Brahmo Samaj. He studied Perso-Arabic literature, the Vedas, and Christianity as well. He was of the firm belief that there is only one universal God. He also wrote a book in Persian about this concept. He translated the ancient Hindu scriptures in Bengali to prove to the laymen that the Brahminical system was wrong. He also promoted intercaste marriages and also focused on women's rights by promoting widow remarriage. The Brahmo Marriage Act was passed in 1872, legalizing Brahmo marriages, intercaste marriages, and widow remarriage. The Arya Samaj. Swami Dayananda Saraswati founded the Arya Samaj in 1875. Dayanand carried forward the ideology of Ram Mohan Roy and tried to project Hinduism on the lines of the interpretation and the authority of the Vedas. He therefore attacked the rigid Brahminical system, condemned child marriage, and promoted widow remarriage, intercaste marriages, and female education. But at the same time, he upheld the fourfold Varna divisions. Schools and colleges were established throughout northern India. The Dayanand Anglo-Vedic School of Lahore is such an example where instructions were given through Hindi and English on modern lines. This society also promoted the protection of cows. It also initiated a reconversion of the Hindus lost to the other religions. Hence, the Arya Samaj became a revivalist movement from a reformist movement. The Prarthana Samaj. The Prarthana Samaj as an organization never had a great influence. But its members like M.G. Ranade, R.G. Bhandarkar, and K.T. Telang were the great leaders of the 19th century. In Maharashtra, they became the founders of the social reform movement in later years. Chandavarkar started a small setup called the Social Science League in 1911 in Bombay. It even now has night schools, technical schools, libraries, recreational facilities, and cooperative credit societies for the working class. The Seva Sadan, which specialized in the care of women of all castes, provided educational, welfare, and medical services. It was started by Malabari. Maharishi Karve inaugurated a women's university. Gopala Krishna Gokhale founded the Servants of India Society in 1915. It was a society for a small number of individuals. They were rigorously trained and were paid only a subsistence salary, but the work of its members in famine relief, cooperatives, and upliftment of tribals became very well known. Some of the others who campaigned for the rights of the Indian woman were Ishwara Chandra Vidyasagar, who campaigned for widows' remarriage in Bengal, Durgaram Mehtaji, who campaigned for the education of women in Gujarat, M.G. Ranade, Gopala Hari Deshmukh, Karsandar Mulji, Jyotirao Phule, Gopal Ganesh Agarkar, and Pandita Ramabai, who all contributed to the betterment of the women's status. Among Muslims, the activists were Khwaja Altaf Hussain Ali and Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah. In South India, R. Venkata Ratnam Naidu opposed the Devadasi system, and Kandukuri Veera Salingam Pantulu worked for marriage reforms. Contemporary literature noted vast changes on the socio-religious levels and portrayed in their publications. Contemporary literature noted vast changes in the socio-religious levels and portrayed these changes in their publications. The new literature did not fail to stress the freedom and equality of all men. One crowning moment for Bengal in particular and India in general was that Rabindranath Tagore won the Nobel Prize in Literature. It was for his collection of poems called the Gitanjali. Some of the other literary giants of this period were Bhartendu Harish Chandra, Vallathol, Premchand, and Muhammad Iqbal. Even in the field of science, some Indians like Ramanujan, C.V. Raman, and Jagdish Bose became world famous by excelling in it. How Indian culture influenced British perceptions. The British as well commissioned studies about Indian culture. It involved several officers of the East Indian Company, missionaries, and its own historians. They could not help but respect the positive aspects of the Indian culture. Sir William Jones, who was a judge of the Supreme Court of Bengal, founded the Asiatic Society of Bengal. This society, through its journal, which was called the Asiatic Researchers, became very well known on studies regarding Indian thought and culture. Sir William Jones also established two societies, namely the British Asiatic Society in 1804 and the Asiatic Society of Great Britain in 1823. The early Orientalist Max Muller also spoke about the unchanging Indian village communities in a very favorable manner. Their perceptions of India was one of a country of philosophers who dwelt on metaphysical aspects. Indian society was depicted as idyllic and one that was peaceful and contained harmony in day-to-day living. In the West, all of this contributed to evolving Indology as a study in Britain and the rest of the world. Indian culture, its negative aspects as perceived by the British. There were two opposite views as projected by Christian missionaries and early Orientalists. According to Charles Grant, who was one of the leading Christian missionaries in the 19th century, Hinduism was the source of dishonesty, social divisions, and debasement of women, and hence all of the Indians lived in a degenerate condition. James Mill's History of British India also said that Indian culture contained evil tendencies, was barbarous, anti-rational, and had been ruled by a series of despots. In his opinion, it was opposed to any change and progress. The best known of the British administrator historians on ancient India was Vincent A. Smith. His work contained the first systematic survey of early Indian history. This remained the most influential textbook for 50 years. It is used by scholars and students even today. His work portrayed a less hostile picture of India than Mill and Smith. Nevertheless, it did say that India had been ruled by a series of tyrannical rulers and only the British rulers ended the tyranny. It was natural that the British citizens formed highly biased opinions based on these writings. In Britain, it created an Indophobia. One aspect that was driven home, and the ulterior motive of all these, was to justify the British occupation and conversion of Indians to Christianity. This also aimed at changing the Indian society through British legislations. The British role in social issues. Women's organizations sought the help of the British government for reforms. The British obliged, though reluctantly. For example, the Montague-Chelmsford reforms in 1919 left undecided the question of women's franchise, which was to be determined later by the provincial legislatures. All the provincial legislatures between 1921 and 1930 granted voting rights to women. The Government of India Act of 1935 increased the ratio of female voters to 1:5 and gave women reserved seats in legislatures. This helped a number of women to launch their legislative careers after the elections of 1937.